Okay, we're going to make a start. I'll just introduce myself. I'm Zoe Lippett. I'm the Exhibitions and Artists Projects Curator here at the new Art Gallery Walsall, and I'm very pleased to introduce Chris Clinton. And thank you all for coming as well. Just to say really by way of an introduction, I first saw Chris's work, first introduced Chris's work at the New Art West Midlands exhibition, which has now become an annual exhibition that showcases the best of the best graduate talent from universities in the West Midlands, and that's become an annual thing now. And it was really sort of after that exhibition I saw Chris's work, and I thought it'd be really interesting artists to work with to develop a show around this series of dartboards. We actually also wanted to support Chris to experiment with some new work, and those are the works that we'll talk about outside, the installation work and the sculpture that's outside here. We'll start first of all by talking about the dartboards, talking about Chris's process, the inspiration, maybe a little bit about the layout. In terms of the format, if you don't like something, shout out. If you want to ask a question, do so. We'll keep it very informal, so please, speak out if there's something that you're dying to ask Chris or that we haven't kind of covered and so on. So, Chris?
Yeah, so basically, like Zoe says, about a year ago, I'd started making this series of works. I've always been quite interested my practice has always referred to painting in a sense, and I've always been interested in reappropriating objects, using material as colour in a sense. I've kind of got onto this process of making these works. It was kind of random in a way. In an old studio that I had, I came across someone had left a dartboard in there. It'd kind of been crushed a bit, and I noticed that, it was made of paper tile. Just basically a playful, experimental approach with materials. I decided to take all the fixtures and fittings off the dartboard. And at the time, again, I was making a very different type of work. I was making a sculpture that was almost like a performative sculpture. So the idea of this first dartboard that I inherited, I knew it was paper tile by that stage. And I tried to basically deconstruct it using these two fans that I was using, and I'd kind of filmed things just happening. That failed, that work, and I basically just decided to remake the dartboard by hand. It was just a standard, kind of dartboard print that you'd normally find. And after doing that, I made something that kind of worked, so it looked as though it could develop into something more than what it was. So I started looking for more of these dartboards online, internet auction sites, and I found.
Just worth saying a little bit about how they differ from regular dartboards that you'd see maybe in a pub or.
Yeah, your standard dartboards are normally made of sisal or bristle, professional ones like Zoe says you'd find in a pub, and you'd be able to play on. But these, it was only through trying to find more of these dartboards and say looking on eBay that I found you could get ones with a novelty value, they belong to a franchise or whatever. So it just seemed to have that kind of subject matter seemed quite interesting to me, and I started making this series of dartboards. And basically, what I do is when I get a dartboard, I'll remove all the fixtures and fittings from it, and they're deconstructed. They come as paper tiles, they're machine made. But what I'll do, using a knife on a flat surface, normally the table at home, I'll deconstruct them. So I've got a spare bullseye. I'll unravel the dartboard around this spare bullseye, so you end up with a dartboard in reverse, and then wind them back the original way. And then they're just finished with a staple. But kind of through that process, you lose the image. They're kind of destroyed in a way, but through that process, it's kind of a preconceived process in a way. That's the way they're made. I'm just following that same process to kind of remake something. So I think I'm adding, rather than trying to preserve an object, I'm kind of destroying it to make something new. And I think that kind of runs through the work that I'm making at the moment.
And of course, like when you do that, the results are quite often surprising, aren't they? You can manipulate the colours and patterns to an extent, but what emerges is something that perhaps you didn't expect.
To begin with, I just wind it up as tight as possible, and it was only through making them that I found, well, it was actually this one there, the Simpsons one, just in front of us. I was making it one day, because I've made a previous version of that, and you didn't have that kind of concentric, like, you know, pattern in it. And yeah, I decided to make another one, and it just through making it, I found, well, hey, you kind of get this pattern, and then the more that I've made, the more I found I've been able to like, manipulate that. So, yeah.
I like the way you give it movement by is it the one to?
The Simpsons one,
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that interests me, and I mean, the process, I'm quite interested in like analogue processes as well, and it is very analogue the way that they're made, they're wound, so yeah, I mean.
And there are sort of imperfections on the surfaces as well of these dartboards, and I suppose it's worth saying that they're not, the imperfections are actually interesting on the surface to you, they're not, it's not a problem that there are imperfections within the surface.
No,
and I think that's what sort of emphasises the human hand as well, the fact that the original printed image and novelty image would have been machine they would have been
they're
machine
just
produced.
flat, like graphic images, so yeah, through that, I mean, they all come with different, like, I call them paintings, and in a sense they are. I mean, I don't have paint, it's the paint that was in the original image, but they all come with like a different, I mean, the one in front that's quite rough, that one's called Iron Maiden, and it had like a flock type fabric paint finish on it, so yeah, basically I had to kind of, rather than just unravelling that, I had to kind of pick it apart. It didn't come apart quite as clean as some of the other ones. But yeah, I could run through what they are actually. Wherever you look at the title. So yeah. So this one's the Walking Dead. Again, they all refer to popular culture in some way. This one's Bullseye. That's one of the first ones I made. The Iron Maiden dartboard. This one's the Simpsons. This one's True Blood. It's like a Hollywood series. This one's Lucky Strike. So this is it's like a vintage dartboard. Again, they take different times to make. Something like this will probably take me a couple of days to unravel and then remake. This took about 2 weeks. It's quite brittle, the paper, so it kept splitting. I had to keep repairing it constantly. So I made it. This one's the Punisher. This one's called J&B. It's J&B Whisker. This one's Billabong. It's a surfing make. This one on the end called NASCAR Kevin Richards, I think. It's like American equivalent to Formula One. Okay. This one's the Bone Collector, which you probably know, the Hollywood film. Yeah. You may have heard of it. They can be quite obscure, to be honest. This one's Spider-Man.
Oh yeah, is that the one?
We know Spider-Man.
My hero. My Marvel comic book here.
I would have getting more of a Marvel comic for you. The end one's Brown, which I think they make, they're at Hunting Mate. Okay. It's a US, they make it into the 90s.
Oh, thank you very much.
What paper did you use?
Sorry, what paper? What it is, they're actually paper coiled dartboards, so that's...
So you utilise each one?
Yeah, that's correct. I basically, in a sense, they are kind of, they're not ready-made, but in a sense that like Duchamp had like is appropriated ready-made.
They're all ready kits.
In a way, even though I'm putting them through a physical process, I don't know how to explain. You know, they're not ready-made, but like I say, they've gone through that process.
It's quite interesting when they look quite flat and you get close and it just behaves as a painting.
Yeah.
It also has a kind of kinetic, it's kind of has a movement about it wherever you look at. And it's interesting where kind of what they were, because I never had a clue how you...
Yeah, I mean, the process is very structural, but at the same time, there's that blurred line between them being painting and sculpture at the same time. And like I say, the actual subject matter does get lost in the making process. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily look at that and think Spider-Man without being told or reading that. And
the colour, so the red.
yeah, I mean, it was quite a deliberate decision not to put the titles next to the works, in a sense. When it comes to kind of planning the show with me and Zoe, to begin with, we were going to put them all, well, we were thinking of putting them all on the one wall. It was quite important that each one kind of had its own identity, which is why we decided against that. You know, they're nicely enough spaced to kind of function as individual pieces, but the fact that we haven't titled each one individually, you could walk into the space and see it as a whole unit.
I like when you get close, you can see the sort of physical performance that you've done. You can see kind of the distance you're at as well, so it suggests something other than just it being painted as sculpture. It feels like it's also kind of a performance. It's not captured because it's quite intense, isn't it? It's quite.
It is. I mean, it's almost like they are machine made to begin with, but it's almost like I'm become the machine in remaking them.
And by way of confession as well, it does actually say in all the marketing materials that it was a full series, but actually, like Chris has mentioned, that the intention originally was to have a really big concentration of, I suppose, sort of targets on a wall and on one wall. Really just to create a really intense viewing experience. And then when we actually got the work into the space, we realised that we had too much work and actually had to edit certain boards out.
I think we left about 5 or 6
out because Chris, in the process of, the period of talking about the show to the realisation of the show, Chris made quite a large number of dartboards really. He had quite a small number before.
Yeah.
Like almost in quite an obsessive way, making more and more boards that you could get hold of.
Yeah. Recycling.
They're quite hard to get hold of, I've got to point out. I've got one in the studio now that I'm going to make, Scarface one. I see it as kind of an ongoing series in a sense. I mean, I have moved on to like making different work now, but I think it's almost like a collection in a way. I see it as kind of collecting these dartboards. I'll go onto eBay every now and again and see if I can find a new one to make. I know there's a couple out there that I'd like to make. There's a 2-pack, one is a wrapper. Some people might know him, but that's kind of like, it's $950. So in a sense, it starts to make me think, well, how collectible are these things? If people are, you know, I can't believe that, I know I collect them to make this work, but thinking other people out there, but it could just be someone who collects things to do with 2-pack or Spider-Man that buy them, I don't know, but they're quite hard to get hold of. I think I brought 2 of them from the UK, and all the rest has come from the US.
I was going to ask you how long it took you to do the paper strips, but knowing now that you recycled, I thought, oh crumbs, that's much better.
I mean, some, they take different times to make.
And how long is the strip, incidentally?
No, I don't know.
You've never been
It's
They're
never ending.
continuous, are they, these strips?
They are, unless it breaks when I'm making it, and then I'll repair it.
And do you paint after?
I don't paint at all.
You haven't painted on
No, that's the original painted image. That's it basically kind of restructured in a way. Yeah.
It was on the paper.
Yeah.
So can I when you're talking about that one there?
The Simpsons
The
one.
Simpsons one, and you said that What did you do? Did you wound it and then
Yeah.
found that it didn't come out as
What
a
it
pattern,
is,
did you
because
get?
I'm kind of, so I unwind the dartboard,
Yeah.
so you end up with a dartboard in reverse because the outer edge ends up in the middle.
Right,
And then when I wind it back, it ends up the original way.
okay.
But the thing is, through that process of hand winding it,
Right.
I can't get it as tight as, say, a
Okay.
machine would have, so it never quite lines up, but I've been able to manipulate the pattern that you get into that. And that was kind of just by chance when I started making that one, that I
Right.
found you could do that, and you can kind of turn sections and line.
Right.
Sections
So I
of-
wondered if you cut it and put, sort of, so you manipulated sections of it as well to get, but it wasn't. It's just a rewinding. It's
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
How much of the process is about trying to find a certain one, or is it just?
well, I could spend a lot of time on eBay. So I've kind of got a knack now because even the people that sell them don't necessarily know they're paper tile. They're not listed as paper tile dartboards, but I've kind of got a way now of spotting one.
You have been looking for like Betty Boop, for example.
Yeah, there's a Betty Boop one that I really want to get hold of, and I probably should have brought it when I first started making them, because I can't get it now. And there's a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle as well. And,
That's distinctive, isn't it, that one?
There's a Hard Day's Night one, a
is
Beatles
there?
one with a Union Jack, and I think that'd be pretty cool to do.
Beatles fan,
Is the
yeah.
end result important to you, or is it just the process? So if you made one and it just didn't really have the image pattern that you were wanting to get at the end of it, or is it?
No,
part of the process?
I think it's more the process, and I'm quite interested in, there's certain ones I probably haven't purchased because I don't think they're not quite that interesting to me to make in terms of the title or whatever.
So
But,
it was about the title rather than, say, the colour in it or something?
I think so, yeah. I mean, certain ones stand out more, but to be honest, I've kind of just been buying whatever I can get. I mean, there's not that many out there.
But there were a couple that were edited out that you did have more of an emotional attachment to, I think
think
because
so.
you did say that you were finding it hard to make that decision. We knew it wouldn't, that they were all competing for space and you couldn't have them all
Yeah.
in here. But
I think
What was that decision based on? Was it,
It
how
was more
visually
of a-
they looked like, or whether it was a title that you were really
I think
attached to?
in terms of the hang of the show, it was more of a formal decision on how they sat together, the works, as opposed to the titles.
I think what the lady's asking is sort of why you felt attached to those, those particular ones that we didn't include.
I just did. They just visually pleased me more, I think. But it was just awkward, wasn't it? It was hard when it kind of maybe looks like finding the right balance in terms of deciding what
The key thing was once we decided 4 instead of 5 worked as a group really well on that wall, everything else in the hang sort of seemed to fall into place, but it was just...
I
And
think
then-
this is the wall we left.
Yeah, making a decision to keep this quite jarring actually, the
Yeah.
colours and actually people could come in here and really concentrate on one wall, or they could take the entire exhibition, the overall feel into account.
How do the colours arrive on the edge of the paper?
Right. Yeah, because the colours, because it's actually printed onto the dartboard surface.
I see. It's okay, I'm with it now.
So, they're ready made.
I was thinking it was randomly on the edge of the coil.
It's kind of funny because, like, when I started making those, I was looking at 4-edge paintings that you find on books.
Yeah.
I really like those. When you just like bend the
Yes,
spine a bit,
yes.
you end up with an image. I mean, it's not really a reference to this, but it was something I was thinking about at the time.
Yes.
The painting and the edge of something.
I was going to say, what do the backs look like?
Right, the backs. I've actually made some pieces that just show the backs. Most of these dartboards, you've just got your standard targets on the back, like your circle target pattern. So yeah, I think that's what you get on most of them. either white and black circles or yellow and black circles.
But if you took one of these off, they've actually got plates on the back now to, because obviously they're actually a lot more fragile than they look.
Yeah.
And so for handling and for conserving them for the future, because some of the early ones didn't look, there was one that we bought for the show that we brought it in, but it didn't actually have a back on, and it was really fragile to kind of handle, wasn't it?
Yeah. To begin with, I was just putting kind of a square of MDF on the back as a bracket.
I was just going to ask about that.
Yeah, but I went on to because like Zoe mentioned, like the fragility of it, and you know, like just moving it around the studio and rehanging it, they'd start to kind of, you know, not fall apart, but you know, they wouldn't stay as flat as they are now. So I had some aluminium plates fabricated. So they're just like, basically they are stuck, so they're permanently fixed like that now. And they're stuck onto an aluminium plate with an adhesive and then a bracket attached to that. So we could hang them.
And the original boxes, they're sort of fascinating objects in themselves, that these dartboards arrive in, like when Chris brought the actual boxes in. But of course, none of the boxes fitted these dartboards any longer because, as Chris has mentioned, because he can never recoil it as tight as a machine, the actual dartboards that you see around here are actually larger than the original.
They end up about an inch bigger than the original dartboard.
God, you'd never know that if you just saw them. Just walked in and had a look. I thought they were painted.
Right.
Yeah.
So did I, because I thought, well, however, have you got the movement on some of the circles, you see? There's movement in the colour, isn't there?
It might be interesting to talk, you know, that turntable that you had made.
Yeah.
Thinking about movement and kind of, you know, because I can imagine you working with that turntable.
I did a residency here before being offered the show, and I was working with audio tape at the time, and I was making these big spiral pieces. It probably came from this, you know, the process of making these. And in the workshop downstairs, I had a big like turntable made just to ease the job of making them, and I've actually used it to make a few of these now. So I mean that movement and that reference to like analogue is kind of that's quite important to the work.
I mean, it's amazing how it duplicates the colour movement. That one there in particular, the grey, it has a movement, doesn't it?
There's definitely like optical thing going on with it.
Yeah.
What I see them functioning as portraits in a sense as well.
If anyone else got no further questions, we could probably just move out to talk about the sculpture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As I said sort of at the beginning of the talk, when I originally met Chris, I was only really aware of the work that he'd been doing with dartboards, but I suppose concurrently you were starting to experiment with VHS tape in the studio.
Yeah.
Firstly, just wrapping it in lots of different ways within the studio, which is really how this work kind of evolved from that, I think.
Yeah, in a way, I mean, with the videotape, again, I had a small video collection. It was stored I had a load of stuff stored at my parents' house, basically, and they wanted to throw it out. Well, they wanted me to take it off their hands, and I didn't want to do that, but again, I thought, how could I reappropriate it into a work? So, at the time, like I say, I had this turntable made when I come onto the residence here, and I was making these like giant tape reels, just I don't know, it just didn't seem to work as a piece for me. So then I started using the tape and wrapping it around sections of the studio and making these like giant reflective screens out of tape. Just kind of really pushing the material. You wouldn't necessarily known it was tape. You know, the way it was tightly wrapped around the studio, and yeah, I mean, I came across this frame, and it is a market frame. I was quite just interested in its simplicity as a structure. I put it up in the studio. It reminded me of like a Donald Judd sculpture or something, you know, like minimalist sculpture or constructivist sculpture. And yeah, I just kind of liked it as an object, and like I say, I was doing these things with the tape where I was responding directly to the studio space, like the pillars in the studio, you know, different fixtures and things, and these pieces just seemed to come together, to be honest. And we're spending time here on the residency in Walsall. It just came together for the show. You know, I knew that through discussion with Zoe, I knew that I was going to make a piece for this corridor. I like the idea of the market in reference to maybe Walsall as a market town. This idea that maybe markets are in decline in a sense, even though I know you've got the new markets downstairs now, but maybe this type of market. And yeah, just this kind of defunct nature of these materials, you know, the market, and you know, in the days of internet shopping and supermarkets and what have you, is yeah, I mean, the pieces seem...
It's got an out of fashion a bit, the old fashion of the market.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, it just seemed to work as a piece, and you know, the market frame as a framework for kind of showing this tape.
Sorry,
I was just going to say, it's really interesting because you're buying things on the internet, so it's kind of commentary and kind of internet shopping, and then you got this kind of a futuristic kind of redundancy of kind of people going outside to shop, and market stores being the cornerstone of the beginnings of kind of outdoor shopping in a sense.
Yeah.
So they kind of, you don't see it immediately, but there is a really kind of a connection between that, and also with the fact that it's got all that kinetic sort of optical illusion thing with it. So I quite like.
Well, the tape's normally housed in a cassette box, and by bringing it out, it's kind of, you're getting a different kind of visual stimulation from it in a way, as opposed to you would from watching, say, the actual film in a conventional way. It's kind of operating in a different way, and
you can see it's going, you know, it's the optical illusion.
Yeah.
again, that idea of like, playing with like optical illusion, and I like the way you've got like this movement and shifting in shape within it. I mean, it is accentuated by the light, to be honest, you know, even more so, which was a conscious decision to put it outside in this space, where you normally do get a lot of light come in.
And that idea again of turning something that was very, you know, domestic, I suppose, very commonplace into something that mimics, perhaps, you know, we talked before about like the splendour of a Chinoise, you know, an 18th century cabinet. And it looks like this really beautiful thing. It kind of removed it from itself, and yet it refers back to itself. And the reflectiveness of the material, obviously with the light coming in, it really sort of plays on that.
I mean, it could be like an architectural model. I don't know. It could be a lot of things, I suppose.
I see the two half circles. Half circle there, and half circle there, and then the diamonds in between.
Yeah, it kind of
I
shifts
think
as you
you're working on the turntable, probably reflected onto the half circles.
That's quite interesting, because you are kind of invited to walk around it and view it in that way. So yeah, that's an interesting point.
What was on the VHS then?
The ones for this actual piece, I went down on the install day and brought a load from the market, but I know there was I can't remember now, to be honest. There was a Spider-Man one in there, which was quite nice, but can't remember the other titles.
Do you know how many takes were in that piece?
Right. I don't. I mean, they're single loops, those, and the pieces that I've made in the past, where I've made a few variations on this, and before I'd just tightly wrap the whole thing so you didn't have any gaps. It it worked as a piece, you know, it was very reflective. You had this like lacquer-like surface to it. But yeah, I was quite interested in just using single leaps with this. In terms of how many tapes, I don't know, probably about
6?
Probably about 6, I'd say, yeah.
Because obviously Chris made it on site, tried out various different, well, this has you know, there's been many iterations of this work, and then made it again when he came on site here, which material he'd sourced locally to make it more specific. Yeah, it's kind of deteriorated slightly while it's been up here. To begin with, I'd come in and fix it, like loops would fall apart, and we just kind of giving in on doing it in the end. I think I'd have been up here probably every other day if I was trying to, you know, it was quite methodically made, and if I would try to keep it in that state that it began, I'd have probably been here correcting it. Like.
What is the material of the tape?
It's, I don't know the actual, it's some kind of plastic. I don't know the actual tape material, but you know your V8.
You don't know the chemical composition?
No, I don't. But it's quite interesting because when you take them out of the box, you've kind of got this gradual, like, there's a difference in tone, basically. So they're all very...
What is the difference in the two circles that side?
I think so. I mean, you can't get the same distance from it round here, so it's kind of... Yeah, it does alter the way you view it, I suppose. But we wanted something that kind of struck you as you come out the lift and walk down towards it. Yeah.
And also, you talked about your parents wanting to throw away all your videotapes, but the selection of that material itself does have a more important significance in terms of sort of outmoded materials, because we've talked about how abundant VHS tape is in charity shops. I mean, charity shops actually not wanting to take it in because there's so much of it about. In the space next to your studio, you've got a pile about this high of videotape. Yeah. And yet it's not valuable enough to have collector's value in the same way that perhaps the dartboards. Yeah, it's kind of, I suppose the tapes at that kind of in-between stage where, like Zoe says, it's not old enough to be collectible, but it's not new. You know, it's kind of, that in-between stage. Can you talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, I can. It's quite new to me, to be honest. So yeah, this work here again, it was this play, this idea I had between, this play between painting and sculpture, in a way. These are old paintings that I've made quite a while ago, to be honest, a few years ago. And I decided to strip them from the frame within the studio, basically just as a way of making space. And I just had them stacked in rolls against the wall, and they kind of reminded me of vinyl samples as opposed to paintings. And thinking about these novelty items, I was thinking about things like posters and what have you, and I decided to wrap them in plastic tubing. I think it references, posters. And also that relationship between painting and sculpture, because, with the plinth style. Yeah, I mean, what it is, again, I wanted to think of a way of showing this as a piece. So this was an old desk that I had remade into a frame, as basically to act as a framing device for the canvases. So it kind of references, in a way, maybe the picture frame, and at the same time a plinth. So again, that idea of painting removed from the frame, but then being framed by it in a sculptural way.
Sorry, just it seems to me your works about non-functionality, but or an exaggerated functionality. So it comes from one form to another. It also becomes about a non-functional or exaggerated part of that, and I think that worked really well with you talked about film, the references earlier, and that, I was wondering whether they were film posts, I didn't realise they were paintings, that's
Yeah, they were paintings because kind of that's, you know, that's what I had to work with at the time. I think this is something that I'm going to be pushing for future work. You know, this is something I'm keen on taking forward now. Yeah, I like it as a piece.
The first three reminds me of bamboo structure.
All right.
Yes. You know how it's structured.
Of the section
Yes.
of the bamboo.
Yes.
Like these ones,
Yes.
the green ones.
Yes.
That's it. I don't know. There's any questions on these? Because
Has the subject matter of the paintings got any relevance?
no, not really. I mean, they're like geometric, abstract paintings.
I think there maybe it's an oblique reference, but obviously you're really into sort of rave culture and that sort of thing. Whether there's a reference there with that history as well, your own personal history.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, they reminded me of like these vinyl samples, whatever they are. They're like some newfangled like Fablon sample. I think, yeah.
If you twist them round, like for instance the fourth one, does it alter like the colour composition?
I think it does. I've played around with it a bit, but I've just kind of left it as a random selection. And to be honest, I think they might have been moved a bit. People do get tempted to kind of pick them out, so it may have changed since I was last here. I'm not sure. Yeah.
How many rows are there?
I think there's 6 times 6.
6.
36.
Is that called a market store thing as well?
No, that's an old, like a desk. There's been a desk frame that's been cut apart and reappropriated. So again, it's that. It was kind of like sort of this play on like the domestic as well, like furniture and the market frame. Kind of references maybe furniture in a sense in its finish and what have you and scale.
Is there any more questions at all? No, that's great. Well done. Congratulations. Yeah. Well, Chris and I will stay around for a little while, so if anything, do you want to talk to us at all? Other than that, thank you for coming.